Leonardo da Vinci was a Renaissance man. He was multi-talented and can easily be considered a genius, maybe even one of the smartest men ever to walk this world. He was an excellent inventor, among many other things. Leonardo was born on April 15, 1452, in Vinci, Italy, just outside of Florence. Shortly after his birth, his parents divorced and he was to live with his dad. While growing up, Leonardo had access to many scholarly books and texts of his family and friends. He often read these and learned a great deal of information on a variety of subjects. Da Vinci's first job was as an apprentice at Andrea del Verrocchio's renowned workshop in Florence. After a couple of paintings, it was clear that Leonardo was a prodigy. His painting, The Baptism of Christ, was so much better than Verrocchio's that Verrocchio apparently claimed to never paint again. In 1482, Leonardo went to work for the Duke of Milan, Ludovico. He worked for him for 17 years. During these years, he really made great steps in achieving greatness. The Duke had him do numerous paintings, but also had him design many different inventions, such as weapons and machines. He was able to design these things because he had been studying geometry, architecture, mechanics, and many other subjects. It was during this time that Da Vinci drew up plans for very advanced weapons, such as an armored tank and a submarine. It was also during this time that he began studying the human body. Leonardo often did not finish what he had started because he thought of something else that he believed to be more important than what he was currently working on. This caused him to only finish 6 pieces during this time. Some of these were from his most popular works, such as The Last Supper. Between 1490 and 1495, Da Vinci recorded practically every detail of his work in notebooks. He included drawings of his paintings and inventions in these notebooks. After the French invaded Italy and forced the Duke out of power, Leonardo da Vinci was forced to find work elsewhere. He traveled throughout Italy doing many small projects. He even traveled with the army for a year as a military engineer. During this time, Leonardo met the great Machiavelli, author of The Prince, one of the most popular works of his time. In about 1503, Da Vinci started on the Mona Lisa, probably his most famous work. In 1516, Leonardo da Vinci was offered the title of Premier Painter, Engineer, and Architect of the King by King Francis I of France. Leonardo da Vinci passed away on May 2, 1519, in Clauge, France. Besides being an excellent painter, Leonardo da Vinci was an excellent inventor. He created many revolutionary ideas that would not be put into use for hundreds of years. These 5 inventions that we are going to discuss are the armored tank, the siege ladder, the cluster bomb, the machine gun, and the scythe chariot. The armored tank was definitely ahead of its time. It was very maneuverable and could move in any direction. It was covered in slanted sheets of metal to deflect whatever was shot at it, and looked somewhat similar to a turtle shell. Near the bottom of the shell, there were cannons all the way around, which meant 360-degree range. The tank was powerful and powered by 8 men turning different cranks. Despite this amazing design, there was one flaw. The cranks went in opposite directions, which prohibited forward movement. Because Leonardo paid attention to every little detail in all of his works, it is believed he sabotaged his own invention in order to prevent the widespread killings it could cause if used in a war. Our next invention was Da Vinci's siege tower. This complex machine was designed to conquer the unforgiving walls of enemy castles. At the time, siege weapons were becoming increasingly popular, as the feudal states of Italy began to erupt in combat. Da Vinci's design was developed to face whatever possible defenses attackers might have to face. The entire concept of the machine was to place its armored bridge on the walls of the enemy's fortress. From here, the attackers would climb onto the bridge and pour their troops into the enemy's city. The great machine would be powered by animals that would push it around from a protected hole at the bottom of the design. Historians are not sure whether or not this siege weapon was actually used in battle. However, we can be certain that if it were, the results would have been devastating for the defending town. Leonardo once said, "I have plans for making a cannon, very convenient and easy of transport, with which to hurl small stones in the manner almost of hail, causing great terror to the enemy from their smoke and great loss and confusion." What he was referring to here was the cluster bomb, one of his more terrifying inventions. The need for this invention came about during the 100 Years' War. It was the first time that armies were fighting on a massive scale once again. Italy, still separated into all of its various feudal states, was greatly outnumbered by the oncoming threat. Therefore, Leonardo came up with a cluster bomb to inflict massive amounts of damage on the enemy before it even hit Italian lines. How the cluster bomb worked was instead of firing one large cannonball, the cannon would fire many small fragments that would be propelled at a deadly velocity into the opposing army. The result was devastating for the opposing side, and the simple sound of cannons being shot off was enough to unnerve even the most seasoned of veterans. Our next invention is probably one of Da Vinci's most devious and effective devices. He had found the key to creating an early version of the machine gun. The design was incredibly innovative, and when used effectively, this new invention could wreak havoc on the battlefield. The main reason Da Vinci developed such a weapon was so he could cause extreme damage and terror to an approaching enemy line. The invention consisted of a total of 24 barrels, 3 tiers with 8 barrels on each. The 3 tiers worked like this. While the first was being fired, the second one was being loaded and prepared to fire. Meanwhile, the third tier, which had just been fired, was cooling down. This allowed for a steady flow of hot lead to pour into the opponents of the Italian warlords. The final invention we plan to show you is Leonardo's scythe chariot. The invention itself isn't original to Leonardo, as forms of it were used by both the Romans and the Persians. However, Da Vinci's touch on the scythe chariot put those primitive forms to shame. The scythe chariot has flaws in itself, however, the most important of which was that it had just as much potential to harm foe as it did friend. The unpredictability of the scythe chariot made it a particularly difficult machine to harness. Leonardo's version of the chariot was somewhat complicated, but extremely destructive. There were 2 different forms of his chariot. Both of these forms used rotary blades that, through the connection of the gears, would be forced forward by the movement of the wheels. The first form would drag the blades behind the chariot, at about knee-to-waist level. This would cause massive loss of life and limb among whoever was unfortunate enough to encounter this machine on the battlefield. The second form was slightly less practical than the first. This had the rotating scythe in front of the horse at a higher level. The problem that this was meant to solve was the issue of hitting your own man with the chariot. However, it is imagined that it would have been very difficult for a horse to maintain tranquility while a death machine whirled around it.